prepared for a particular community. Like in New Zealand, there is a primitive community, Maoris. So they have a separate electorate, and one of the candidate will come out of that only. So that ensures that that community has a definite representation in the parliament. So rather than making it part of the general electorate, they have a separate electorate for that marginalized community. So based on that, what are the lessons which we have learned? One is that community-led approach is always a way. There are community leaders. In India, we have concept of booth-level agents, booth-level officers who encourage voters to participate. Technology should be an enabler, not a barrier, because when we talk about marginalized people, we have to keep in mind that they may not have connectivity to the internet, and also 100% reliance on on technology should not be there. But through concepts like online registration, online voting, and online educational programs, technology should enable the marginalized people. So more focus has to be on these things. Sustained engagement beyond election. It should not be just 15 days prior to the election that you engage with the people. They don't get confidence, and they have a lot of distrust also in the institution. So it has to be a continuous engagement with the marginalized people, and then it is data driven. So if we know that, okay, as I told you, in India we have concept of vulnerability mapping and critical polling station. So if you have data that, okay, these are the hamlets where disadvantageous people are living, you can focus more through various approaches. In Goa, we have done a study through, now we have Dr. Rahul Tripathi already here. So we did a knowledge, aptitude and practice of voters KP survey. It's on a regular basis. The 2024 survey, we see that what is the impact of inclusive practices in Goa. So the results are startling, that there is a 34% average increase in the voter turnout of the marginalized community because of the targeted actions which we just spelled out, and there is a 2.5 times representation of the people from the marginalized section in the political direct political governance, and 67% satisfaction rate among the voters depending on the facilities provided either for registration of voter or on the voting day. So that is the it's a ground level survey. Professor Rahul Tripathi will be able to talk more once he says. So this is these are the measurable results because of all the interventions we have done, state specific as well as per the directions of the Election Commission of India. Thank you. So now, because I am the moderator also, I will invite Mr. Piyush Ikwambi, who is Honorable Commissioner, Namibian Election Commission, to please make his presentation.
Thank you. So delighted I feel at home that other people from the other part of the world, they call me Pius, but I'm being called Pius here. So it comes close to home, but I'm grateful for any reference. So thank you. I'm going to present the Namibian case on how we endeavor to advance inclusive electoral participation from the perspective of the Electoral Commission of Namibia. So just to set the context, Namibia's attempts are obviously premised on constitutional principles, the principles of equality, universal suffrage, as well as affirmative action measures which are sanctioned or specifically provided for in terms of the Constitution. They are entrenched in terms of a specific chapter in the Constitution, which make it inherently difficult for even Parliament to amend in a manner that would detract or diminish them. So since our independence in 1990, after suffering some decades of apartheid rule and regime, the country has, through the Commission, held credible as well as inclusive elections. We are, however, cognizant of the fact that there are still, despite those over 35 years since independence, there are certain structural and social barriers which inhibit full democratic participation for certain classes of people. This is regardless of specific measures in terms of other legislation as well as the Constitution, which provide or guarantee access to all citizens. In terms of statistics, so Namibia is a big country by landmass, but in terms of population numbers, we are a very small population. So 3 million, as per the last census, 3 million makes up the population of the whole country. In terms of voting, you are required to be of an age of majority, 18 years, to be eligible to register to vote. From our last general registration of voters, which was in 2024, we registered 1.4 million eligible voters, and that is 90% of the eligible voter population, those that have attained 18 years and above. You might be wondering why is it 90%? It's because voting and registration is not compulsory. But for us, that is a big achievement, 90%. It's a good achievement. In terms of further demographics, so of the 1.4 million, 46.1% comprises of the male. Females make up 53.9% of those registered voters. And we have further drawn it down to the youth as a special category. In terms of the National Youth Policy, the youth are defined as those of the age of 18 up to the age of 35, and they make up 42.9% of the registered voters. The persons with disabilities, and the disabilities you really, they vary from whether it's sight, mobility, and the like. They make up 1.4% of our voting, of the number of registered voters. That is just slightly above 22,000. So you might be then wondering, why should an EMB then be more concerned for a marginal number of 1.4% of those registered voters? And this is our case. We say it is important to include those that are marginalized in our electoral processes, because it's important for them to participate in the governance of the country. That is what democracy ensures. When you register and eventually vote, you are participating in the election of the governance of your country, and by that measure, you are able to influence the leadership, policy direction, as well as the national development priorities. In fact, one of the court cases in the Supreme Court of Namibia, the judges pronounced that it is through elections that citizens are able to discipline their own government. Participating in democracy for citizens, in our view, it also fosters accountability, like that discipline that I alluded to earlier, speaks of transparency. And for the marginalized communities, it's an opportunity for them to assert their rights and to have a sense of belonging through representation. So how do we then come to categorizing the marginalized groups in Namibia? In our view, these are largely influenced by the historical, geographic, social, as well as economic factors. And because of these factors, we are of the view that we then have to invoke specifically targeted interventions to accommodate those that are the persons with disabilities, differently abled, as well as the minority communities such as the San and the Himba. The Himbas, it's the picture you see there on your right. They are nomadic people of our society. And because of these historical as well as geographic factors, some of these citizens reside in very sparsely populated areas and areas with a very, very difficult terrain to reach. At times, the Commission has to invoke or to get the assistance from the army, to get helicopters to fly to these very difficult areas to reach especially for the nomadic people. And sometimes you spend so much money, but that's the cost of democracy, to just get one vote, if not two. But the cost is quite astronomical. There are also other socially, economical, and vulnerable groups. The youth, because of the Gen Zs and this whole thing, they also regard themselves, because of the representation issues, they also regard themselves as marginalized. So we have also categorized them as such a group that requires targeted interventions. And I will, in a minute, share with you those interventions that the Electoral Commission of Namibia has endeavored to invoke to accommodate this specific class of people. So in terms of the legal framework, like I indicated earlier, Namibia is a constitutional democracy. Suffrage, equality are all constitutionally sanctioned mechanisms, and the Constitution guarantees the right for peaceful political participation as well as the right to vote. It is also the same Constitution that creates the Electoral Commission as an independent and impartial body to supervise and direct electoral processes in Namibia. So all other processes are then ancillary to this, provided for or regulated in terms of the Electoral Act, which provides for the universal and equal suffrage, obviously just further enhancing what the Constitution provides. It also provides and guarantees the transparent and credible elections, and an inclusive, or calls for an inclusive electoral administration. And through these measures, the Constitution and the Act, the Commission is then mandated to uphold democratic principles in all our electoral activities. Specific measures that the Commission has invoked to ensure that inclusive participation is achieved. So inclusive participation is part of our strategic objective as the Commission. We put in place specific measures to ensure that we remove barriers that may inhibit those classes of people or citizens that I demonstrated earlier from participating in electoral processes. We also have what we call a mainstreaming policy, a gender mainstreaming policy to ensure inclusion across our electoral operations. And we also have targeted interventions which promote equity in our processes. And more interestingly is that as part of our recruitment of polling officials, we ensure that at least a minimum of 5% is allocated to election officials who are from the marginalized communities, so that they can speak to these voters and potential voters during registration processes. So we ensure that when we recruit our polling officials, there is a specific quota available to our marginalized communities, be it your persons with disabilities, your differently abled, blind, and so on, as well as the nomadic persons, so that they can easily relate through voter education as well as through the registration processes. So I spoke about this already, that the indigenous persons are considered in the recruitment process, and we do this with a view of achieving cultural diversity, as well as to ensure that when we undertake our processes, certain cultural sensitivities are also accommodated. We also believe that by doing so, by including these special categories of people in our recruitment, it makes it easy for us to tailor voter education which is able to respond to the unique cultural and social contexts. I also indicated on this already that the Commission has what we call a disability mainstreaming framework, and through this framework there are specific interventions on a yearly basis where management and through the guidance of the Commission ensures that there are specific measures designed to improve access to electoral information, to ensure or enhance physical accessibility, as well as to create an enabling environment for the participation of special categories of of the population. So we also ensure that when it comes to voting and registration, our venues are assessed to ensure that they are able to accommodate differently abled persons. So encouraging venues to be on the ground floor so that all have access. We also train our officials to ensure that they are able to cater for all diverse groups and categories of voters. And like I indicated, that quota of the marginalized communities that we recruit, they are not only recruited in simple positions, but they also take up leadership roles, such as being presiding officers and polling officers, as well as returning officers. We also ensure that when we do conduct voter education, and even when we print our election material, we incorporate tactile ballot papers and the braille. For those that are differently abled, such as the blind, for example, if they cannot access or make use of those tactile ballot papers and the braille, in terms of the Electoral Act, it also makes specific provision for assistance to be provided by a presiding officer to those voters who may be incapacitated in one way or another. And this is to ensure the secrecy of the ballot. So not just anybody, you can come with any person that can assist you, but if you don't come with anyone, the presiding officer is empowered in terms of the law to be the person at that polling station to assist you, to ensure that the secrecy of your vote is protected. At the polling stations, we also display voter education materials, and this is to provide guidance, so continuous voter education, even up until the polling station level. And we obviously continue to collect data to monitor the specific interventions that we already have in place as emerging trends evolve, to ensure that we are able to cater for those. Other interventions is the translation into local languages. So our electoral material is translated in a number of local languages. This includes obviously your voting processes, the material that is also displayed at the polling stations. We try to print in large print. When we do voter education on national television, we get the services of sign language interpreters. We try to produce our material and incorporate it or embed it on audio and visual formats. And this is to ensure all these efforts are really designed to ensure that there is no voter that is left out due to literacy, language, or disability. Let us now go to the new category that we have included of marginalized. Like I indicated, the youth, because of accommodation, and so they regard themselves to be marginalized, and they are therefore demanding a seat at the table. So the Commission has designed specific measures to accommodate this group of people, which in terms of our national youth policy, youth are regarded to be persons of the age of until 34. And in terms of our voters' roll, they represent 42.9 of the registered voters. So the Commission has since 2024 introduced a program called Youth Ambassadors. This is where you will take a youth ambassador, the national lead youth ambassador for the country, and as well as cascading it down in the regions and the constituencies. And this is to ensure that the youth listen to those who speak their language through social medias, short videos, dramas, so basically voter education through those interventions, through the language that the youth can speak and appreciate. So they engage their peers through visits to schools, universities, community events, but mostly through the digital means, social media. This is to ensure active citizenship to this special group of people. In terms of the challenges, we indicated that Namibia, most of it is a desert. So we have geographic constraints. Some of the areas are indicated we require military assistance to reach, helicopters and all of that. Very costly exercise, but democracy is expensive, they say. We also have limited infrastructure for some of our far remote areas, especially where the nomadic people reside in. We have the language and diversity barriers, even if we try to now incorporate your translation interventions. But we also have, your social stigma as well as your entrenched stereotypes from your nomadic presence and so on. I think the resource capacity we already spoke of. For your nomadic persons, it's quite difficult to even conduct research because then data becomes very difficult for your planning, especially for your nomadic persons such as the San and the Himba. So that is quite a challenge when it comes to trying to implement improvements on the interventions that you already have in place. What we have, however, learned is that regardless of those challenges, we will continue making strides to enhance on our interventions because democracy requires deliberate institutional commitment, and it is continuous so that we can continue addressing those emerging challenges, and it is important to ensure sustainable inclusion. So it's a moving terrain. It's a continuous process. You don't think you have it all packaged in one box. You continue digging deeper and deeper and benchmarking and learning from best practices to ensure that you improve on your interventions that have already been targeted. And this is what we have concluded to say: an inclusive electoral process is the foundation of a strong democracy, which is why we are specifically geared to continue improving on our targeted interventions on a yearly basis. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pius, for this nice presentation, giving us some insights on the Namibian electoral system and how you are taking care of the marginalized sections of the society. Now I invite Professor Dr. Rahul Tripathi. He is a professor with Department of Political Science, Goa University, to please make his presentation. Thank you.
A very good morning to all of you. Thank you, Chairperson, sir, and all the panelists for this very, very august company. Sir, I presume we would have some limitation of time.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
So 10 minutes was original, but I think we'll have to cut it down further. And being professors, we are used to speaking for long. The way the two policy makers spoke was actually like professors, so there is not much left for a professor to speak. But I'll make a few points, and in that sense, being a political scientist, we would often like to tell stories. So first I thought I'll tell one story, but I'm inclined to tell two stories. So there is a story of a girl from a very remote part of India, a tribal village, Odisha, state, Santhal tribe, which is one of the most backward tribes in India. Family is very poor, and somehow she struggles, studies, becomes the first educated person from her own village, and despite all the struggles, decides to continue studying further, joins higher education, decides to become part of community building efforts, joins political party, gets opportunity, and then she goes on to become the President of India. So President Draupadi Murmu, the current President of India, is an example before us. The other story I have is of President Sam Nujoma, who himself, known as the founding father of Namibia, went through his own struggles, which were of a very, very different kind, apartheid, built together a team, had a dream, and saw to it that the dream got fulfilled eventually. So what is there in these stories to tell? Which is that perhaps the most successful stories emerge from the areas which are most marginal. So what is it that you need? You need an agency. And it is our firm belief here, given the experiences that we have, that elections in a democracy provide that agency, which actually helps the most vulnerable and the most marginal of all to become part of the larger nation building process. So it's, in that sense, I think we are meeting in a very, very positive setting, and it's really appreciated that a country like Namibia is our partner institution. And we would like to see this partnership grow as we move along towards the preparation of the final report. Some very quick points on what is marginality. I mean, we political scientists can go on theorizing about marginality, but marginality, first and the foremost, brings in vulnerability. Somebody who is very marginal is vulnerable economically, socially, culturally at times, making his or her position quite difficult in a larger society where there are other diversities existing. Marginality also creates disempowerment. The person simply would not have the power to take decisions and influence decisions in that sense. And vulnerability and disempowerment can at times lead to alienation. And once alienation starts setting in, I think that can become a very, very critical factor for democracy. And that may lead to a lack of faith in democracy. And that is exactly where I think elections, electoral exercises, the specific focus and attention that is given to the marginal groups become very, very significant. And therefore, elections anywhere must focus on the marginal and the most vulnerable. And in that sense, again, the importance of this particular group, given the larger theme of the IIIDEM conference and India's chairship of international IDEA, is including the marginalized. So it's a very important role, therefore, that this group has. The elections need to focus on the most marginalized. Western nations have this concept of covering the last mile. So the last mile has to be covered for any developmental process. But in India, we have this perspective of the last man. It is the last man who needs to be covered for any intervention to be made more meaningful. And it is exactly that which has been the core of our democratic process. It's not that India's journey towards this democratic strengthening has been very smooth. I mean, we went through our own struggles, learning by doing, to a stage where we have reached a certain level of confidence where we can certainly give and share experiences with other countries. The biggest challenge that we have is our own diversity. A country of 1.4 billion people, 96.88 crore electorate, you can imagine the kind of scale of elections that Indian elections are. And India is not very homogeneous. It's one of the most diverse societies, ethnically, culturally, linguistically, geographically. The challenges that Sanjay sir pointed out. Against that background, therefore, the utmost responsibility of any elections at a broader level, therefore, is to try and intervene to the best extent possible in making the elections more and more inclusive. In my presentation, which actually converges with most of the things which have been done, I have spoken about democracy and how it leads to the empowerment of the marginalized, basically the link which is there between democracy and the power that needs to be given to the people at large, arguing that democracy actually has the power to create greater space for the marginal and the excluded. the conception of marginality, therefore, can vary across. It could be with regard to the political dimension, economic dimension, geographic, religious, and therefore, if you do not include them, the risk of further alienation always is there, and that would undermine the democratic content of any society. Therefore, the Indian Election Commission, and as was very, very effectively pointed out by the Namibian presentation, that including the marginalized sections for larger electoral participation in the respective countries has been given very, very significant attention. How to do that? One is a general way you go about it: greater sensitization, publicity, electoral literacy. The sweep program that Mr. Goel pointed out is a unique program of systematic voters education and enrollment program, where we tend to seek perspectives of voters with regard to how we can ensure that more and more people come out and vote. And I'm very happy to point out that Goa, being one of the most literate states in India, has over the years seen an increasing rate of electoral participation. Although, as I was discussing with you, ma'am, the contrast is that the participation in our local level elections is the highest, followed by the state level elections, and the national level is a bit low. Whereas in Namibia, it is just the other way around. So many contrasting examples to be seen. Therefore, inclusive elections are important for any mature democracy. They legitimize the larger electoral process. And very, very effective examples have been given, and my colleague Sudesh also would point out specific success stories that Goa has pointed out as far as the marginal people are concerned. Some examples of best practices. This again will come out in a more detailed way in our report. Canada, accessible polling stations. Brazil, for elderly and physically challenged voters. Mexico, gender quotas and women-focused polling arrangements. Australia and New Zealand, mobile polling units. This is something which India is yet to think about, and perhaps the challenge of reaching out to the most remote areas, these could be a solution. Similarly, there have been special arrangements as far as the marginalized and the vulnerable are concerned. These are the stories across which can be shared specifically. Perhaps we can go into more details of it as we start writing our final report, how effective they have been. We have had our own experiences, and then again Sudesh will tell you about some things that we have done in Goa. And in conclusion, therefore, as we say that the principle of exclusion of the most marginal and the vulnerable are key to any democratic empowerment. It's all the more needed to legitimize the faith in the larger electoral process. And therefore, the best way for us forward is to share each other's experiences. So I decided I'll not speak as a professor today, just give the main points, and we'll follow it up with questions and answers as we follow. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Dr. Tripathi, for your two beautiful examples on how marginalized are empowered in India and Namibia. Now I invite Dr. Suresh Kaude. He is from IIPHB Goa to please make his presentation.
Respected dignitaries on the dais and experts on election management throughout the world. As already in global context and in Indian marginalized section of the society, I will be more focusing on the practical aspects, how we work in the field to achieve or to empower the marginal section of the society, which includes the women, persons with disabilities, transgenders, senior citizens. The best practices in India, in Indian context, that is decentralization and grassroots democracy. If we see in the Indian context, as per the Panchayat Raj Act, we have a three-tier system, that is Panchayat, Village Panchayat, Panchayat Samiti and the Jilla Parishad, apart from the state legislature and the parliament. Then political reservation for women and marginalized section 33% for women, and as Sir said, 50% for women reservation in Bihar and Kerala, Bihar and West Bengal. Tribal self-governance and indigenous democracy. This is a very important aspect. If we see the tribal involvement in the Forest Right Act 2006, which empowers in Gram Sabha 50% of the tribal people from the marginalized sections, they participate. Then the land which they cultivate, the land which for so long period of a time, because the Gram Sabha only the voters, the eligible voters can attend the Gram Sabha. Again, that it is helps the tribal community. Disability inclusive electoral practice. India is a signatory for UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and then as per that we have amended our old acts and the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016. Section 11 mandates that Election Commission of India and the State Election Commission shall ensure that every polling station is accessible to the person with disabilities. Inclusion of transgender and LGBTQ plus communities. We talk about again the law which empowers the transgenders, the identity certificate given by the district magistrates in India, and to bring them to the mainstream along with the other communities. Then electoral inclusion of migrants and urban poor in Maharashtra. The special awareness programs in the slum areas have been carried out to involve them. Digital democracy and e-governance. We have yesterday only we have seen the ECINet and lots of apps which were help for the voters to involve them in election process. The postal ballot for PWD and senior citizens. It is a very good initiative. Recently, since 2022, we have seen now, if we take example of the person with disabilities and senior citizens, those senior citizens above 85 plus have been empowered with the home voting, postal ballot facilities. One of the example from Kolimpong, Darjeeling from West Bengal, the woman, 106-year-old woman who was residing in a hilly area, because of the postal ballot facility, the polling team goes to the homes and it empowers the senior citizens to vote without any hassles. Then the free and fair electoral services. We know that we can enroll in the election process without any payment. Through BLOs, booth level officer, they reach house to house, door to door. Apart from that, with the use of technologies, with the use of different apps, they can enroll themselves. So under the Election Commission of India's guidelines, we try to reach out to each and every marginalized section of the societies, and in each and every polling stations, we see that there are ratio and minimum facilities provided to empower the marginalized section of the society, which includes pregnant women, senior citizens, then person with disabilities. When we talk about person with disabilities, as per the RPWD Act 2016, there are 21 different types of categories. We see that each and every category is enrolled. So signages, help desk, polling booths at the ground floor, booth volunteers, proper pathway from entrance to the voting compartments, proper ramps with proper gradients, toilet facility, accessible toilet, drinking facility, wheelchairs, lighting, display of accessible posters, parkings, transport facilities, all these are ensured. How we have done access audit is one of the important aspects when we reach to the each and every polling stations, and for that I will suggest that each and every country should exercise this access audit, which focuses on the assured minimum facilities. For that we have to train the access audit teams, which includes engineers, accessibility coordinators, ERO, DO, polling staff, BLO. Especially we have to also involve the person with disability in this process. Inclusive events and activities, appointments of state icons, district icons, so we have to involve them. Their participation is very much essential, identification and enrollment of voters from marginalized groups. The initiatives we have taken in Goa was appointment of a Divyang Mitra. In each booth, we have seen that a person with disability, government employees, he will assist the BLO in identification and reaching out to them, so that when there is a peer group approach, no person is left behind. Celebration of National and International Day. Election is not just a one day, or it is a particular period. We have to focus on all the international days, International Women Days, World Tribal Day, then Senior Citizen Day, so that we can involve them, International Wheelchair Day, International Day for Persons with Disabilities, so that throughout the process, once we are within them, they will be empowered to reach and come to the vote. Accessible transport facilities, wheelchair availability at every polling stations, participation in the International Purple Fest. I will specifically would like to mention that Goa has organized International Purple Fest, wherein more than 20 countries across the globe participated, and our CEO office was also a part of it in reaching out to the voters, as well as those persons with disabilities who participate in various the sports events, cultural events. They are part of the Purple Fest, and when they share their expertise or experiences of voting, it helps to again empower the marginalized section of the, correct, sir. So I will just show you the accessibility routes, just how we have helped the senior citizens and a person with disabilities who were otherwise a single voter from one of the AC constituencies, wherein we have a Divyang Rath vehicle which is specially designed for helping the person with disability, senior citizen, to reach out to the polling stations. Just one more slide, sir. Then the booth manned by person with disabilities and women. Although the person with disabilities are exempted from the election duties, we have conducted various orientation programs to empower them to participate in the election process, and the 8 booths were with disabilities men. And yesterday in one of the session it was discussed that for carrying the ballot unit and all that, for women it became difficult, but you can see that our person with disabilities along with the duties carry out all these things. And then international observers also participated to understand and learn the importance of democracy, which is carried out. Pink booths which are manned by women employees, and this is the green polling station. You can see to empower or for sustainable environment, and to also attract the tribal communities because they are near to the nature. And this is one of the use of effective social media, wherein the different countries, when you upload your contents on the social media, different countries can see your best practices through these medias. And the conclusion and way forward, almost all of us come to the conclusion that inclusion is a major area wherein we have to work on. Strengthen standards, guidelines and benchmarks, investing training and capacity buildings, effective use of social media. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gowde. Now we have the last speaker on the panel, Professor Ashok Acharya ji. Sir, I will request you just to be quick because we are short of time. Another session will take place in the same seminar. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Where's the front? All right. Good morning, everyone, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here, to be speaking to this august audience, as well as the very capable and extremely useful presentations that we had from my colleagues on the dais, both on what is happening in Goa and also in Namibia, in India, Goa, India and Namibia. I think, first of all, before I begin, I think the Goa team deserves, a huge round of applause for organizing this under your, because this will now become a sort of an example for many others, and especially for those who in the rest of the country, but also elsewhere. Now, one of the important lessons that we have learned, from Professor Tripaঠি's and our Namibian friends' presentation, is that when you secure representation for people, from the marginalized sections in the working of the election commission itself, जैसे आपने कहा सुदेश जी कि that when you have the Divyang actually manning the electoral stations, and you said that there is around 5% or something that you set aside. I think this is a very useful thing that we learn from this comparative exercise. My own take would be, I'm a political theorist, so please forgive me, because I may not match the sort of crispness that has been offered here, but I will try do something, raise maybe just one or two questions and not more. I would just go about to say, and I know time is short, so I won't take too long. So I will say that, democracy does not empower by default. By default, democracy doesn't mean much. Because there are many models of democracy that you have around the world, and you have had for the longest of years. The analytical error, in my view, lies in treating democracy as a moral guarantee rather than a contested arena where marginalization persists through informal power structures and institutional designs. So in spite of, at times, the best of the effort, democracy itself can also marginalize people. And this is best understood in a formal political sphere, and also as well as in the informal political sphere. So democracy will only serve as an instrument of empowerment under very specific political, institutional and social conditions, where it is important to understand, where it disrupts domination rather than reproducing it. And that is why I think that all of you, practitioners of election management, have taught us that how best do we disrupt, domination and not allow it to be reproduced. So, I think representation of marginalized groups, the one thing that we can think of, theoretically, reconfigures not only decision-making authority, but alters distributive priorities. The more people present at where decisions are being made, that is where distributive priorities can be questioned, can be democratized, and more can go. And yet, at times, the new scholarship says that representation itself, by itself, may not be enough, right? That, at times, you can, so what we need is periodic, constant re-evaluations to gauge the extent of empowerment over a certain period of time. So this is a new thinking. So there was a thinking just around 10, 20 years ago that if you allow the marginalized sections to represent themselves, but that has become a little tokenistic in many areas of the world. And it is not delivering the goods that it is supposed to. And, maybe one of the reasons is the ways in which how parties themselves, force people, belonging, not really force, but make them do things in a certain way that they don't any longer represent the marginalized sections, but basically the party point of view. So, and this is my last slide. And so, is inclusion symbolic? There is also another thing that, this is where I want to point out just one thing, that what the marginalized seek are dignity compacts that not only offset a deep sense of powerlessness. There are degrees of powerlessness that we all feel and perceive at different points in our life and as we mature as citizens. But, when we experience powerlessness, it is about, very small things. But the sense of powerlessness that the marginalized can experience is something that you have to understand with a certain bit of an empathy. So some contend that the idea of inclusion may itself sound a bit patronizing. What might be needed is full democratic citizenship rather than just inclusion. Somebody decides, okay, I will include you. That's at times that may not be enough. And there is a need then to both reimagine and reinvigorate democratic empowerment through practices such as the ones that we have already discussed, where EMBs can play a crucial role in spite of the various challenges they face, including, I for instance, I have my complete sympathy for how, under what pressures the EMBs perform with, there is always this pressure on them to perform within a set period of time with very little cash reserves, very little resources, and yet they perform very well. But at the same time, I think if we are to take this up, and especially under the Indian chairship of, the international idea, I think it is also time that we toy around with and also think about. There are many other, practices that I don't want to go into detail for want of time, about deliberative procedures and all that could be brought in. But, of course, within the ambit and the mandate of what the EMBs can do. But it was, but I think I've learned more than I could share. So many thanks for you all for giving me a patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Acharya, for sharing your insight. I am sorry we have to cut short the question and answer session. So just to conclude, as with all the panel speakers we had on the dais, the inclusive democracy, inclusive electoral practices are a reality. So democracy is becoming participative and it's a lived reality. And the inclusive practices are changing the lives of people, especially the marginalized people. With the emerging trends, whether in India or worldwide, they are very clear and very visible that the people are participating. The marginalized people, because of all the interventions by the state, are a force to reckon with, and it is forcing the policy makers to shift policies in favor of the marginalized. And finally, as there is a Gandhiji's talisman that whenever you are in doubt about your action, always think that whether your action will directly or indirectly support the last person, the last marginalized person you see on the street. So do that action. Similarly, as electoral officials also, whenever we are in doubt, we have to assess our action in terms of that talisman, that what our action will contribute to the last marginalized person we see on the street. So with all these thoughts, I thank you, Dr. Elsie, Mr. Piyush, Dr. Rahul Tripathi, Dr. Sudesh Gaudeji, and Professor Acharya for your insightful things. And I thank the Election Commission of India also for giving us a platform to share our thoughts. And anyway, whatever discussions we had today, it will be followed and it will be part of the report that will be prepared before this year end. Thank you again. Thank you. Do it later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for such an insightful session, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. That's now that is the end of session. Thank you.